Hi everyone, you're all very welcome to today's Parent Information Talk. Today's topic is the importance of sleep for children and young teens. This talk is presented by the Mayo Primary Care Child and Adolescent Psychology Service, and the information in this talk is relevant for parents of school-age children and young teenagers. So an overview of the talk today, we're going to look at the importance of sleep, sleep and children, and then we're going to look at ways to support sleep, and we're going to break this down into things that we can do before bedtime, at bedtime, and in order to help our children stay asleep. And then we'll go through the take-home messages at the end. So the importance of sleep. We tend to think of sleep as a time when the mind and the body shut down, but this is not the case. Sleep is an active period in which a lot of important processing, restoration, and strengthening occurs in the brain and in the body. So while we sleep, our bodies repair, we build up muscle, and our immune system strengthen. Getting a good night's sleep is also important for our mood, concentration, and psychological well-being. So sleep is not just time out from our busy routine. We do need to sleep well in order for our bodies to recover from the day and to allow healing to take place. And it's interesting to note that with increasingly busy lives, it's estimated that we now sleep around 90 minutes less each night than people slept in the 1920s, which is an interesting fact. One of the vital roles of sleep is to help us solidify and consolidate memories and information. As we go about our day, our brains take in an incredible amount of information. And rather than being directly logged and recorded in our brains, these facts and experiences first need to be processed and stored, and many of these steps happen while we sleep. Overnight, pieces of information are transferred from short-term memory to long-term memory, and this process is called consolidation. So when we sleep, we consolidate our memories and our information, which basically means we lock down all the information that we've learned throughout the day. And as we can see, this has particular importance for children and teenagers, given all the information that they encounter each day, particularly if they're studying for exams and learning new things each day in class and learning new social situations, etc. All this information that they take in during the day needs to consolidate or bed in at nighttime when they're sleeping. So it's really of paramount importance that children get enough sleep for their brain development and specifically for their learning and for their memory. Sleep is as important as nutrition and exercise for children, and when children meet the adequate number of sleep hours for their age on a regular basis, they're likely to see benefits including better behaviour, better attention span, better learning, better memory, better emotional regulation, and an overall better quality of life. And the research supports this and backs this up. So sleep is as important as nutrition and exercise. And as you can see from that list, it affects pretty much every aspect of life for children. So, what is the recommended amount of sleep that we should be getting? This chart is taken from the American Sleep Foundation, and it's a breakdown of the hours of sleep that our children and teenagers should be getting for their age bracket. So if we look at this here, we can see that toddlers ages 1 to 2 should get 11 to 14 hours of sleep. Preschoolers 3 to 5 year olds need 10 to 13 hours. School age children, so that's the 6 to 13-year-olds, it's recommended that they get 9 to 11 hours of sleep. And then teenagers there, that's the 14 to 17 or 18-year-olds, it's recommended that they get 8 to 10 hours of sleep. So looking at this chart here, we can see that a lie-in or a sleep-in for teenagers is often necessary. And the reason they need these sleep hours is to consolidate the information they've learned throughout the day. So if they're studying for long periods of time during the day, but they're only getting 5 or 6 hours sleep that night, the information that they've learned during the day may not stick. Particularly relevant as well for teenagers doing exams. So interestingly as well, the recommended sleep for adults is 7 to 9 hours a night, and that's recommended by the American Sleep Foundation. Research indicates that children go in and out of 4 or 5 periods of deep sleep during the night. As they come out of these deep sleep cycles, dreams occur and they can awaken. And we as adults actually have less deep sleep cycles, so we're less likely to awaken during the night. Recent research suggests that children in families with good bedtime routines showed better performance in terms of attention, memory, and flexibility. And children also scored higher in their readiness for school and had better dental health. So, looking at this research here, it's normal for children to wake up throughout the night as they come out of these deep sleep cycles. So, they are more prone to waking up when they've gone to bed. Whereas adults, we don't have as many deep sleep cycles a night. And interestingly, the research suggests there that children that do have good bedtime routines perform better in terms of attention and memory and flexibility. So again, this is just backing up the research that shows that sleep is very, very important for children and teens. There are a few common sleep difficulties, and we won't be going into these in too much detail. And the main common sleep difficulties would be problems getting to sleep, the fear of being left alone, difficulty staying asleep once they do fall asleep, and nightmares are another one that some children may experience.
So, lack of sleep not only affects our physical health, but it also affects our mental health. Sleep problems can lead to emotional dysregulation. So, that basically means difficulty controlling our emotions. So, for example, we may become upset or angry more easily. It can lead to increased anxiety or low mood. It can lead to aggression or irritability. And we know ourselves that if we've had a couple of bad nights' sleep, we're feeling tired, we may become more irritable. It can lead to impulsivity, and that means difficulty sustaining attention on something, and decreased immunity. So we may be more vulnerable to picking up colds that are going around as the body isn't repairing itself as well as it could if we were getting optimal sleep.
So, what can we do to help our children get to sleep, stay asleep, and have a good quality sleep? And as I said previously, we're going to talk about strategies aimed at preventing difficulties divided into three categories. So we'll look at before bedtime, at bedtime, and during the night. So, what can we do before bedtime? Before we even get to bed. So, we need to talk about a few important things that we can do throughout the day and at night time in order to help our child fall asleep and have a better quality sleep before bedtime. The things that we'll focus on in this section are things like exercise, diet, relaxation, screens, and bedrooms.
Exercise. As little as 10 minutes of aerobic exercise a day, such as walking or cycling, can drastically improve nighttime sleep quality. Physical activity may help tire very active children naturally. Encourage your child to exercise in the hours before bedtime, but not too close to bedtime. Gentle stretches may be beneficial. So, with exercise, it's important to get the timing right. And it seems pretty self explanatory that exercise will tire a child out and make them more ready to go to bed. But actually, exercising too close to bedtime can make it more difficult for your child to fall asleep. So, exercising earlier in the day may help improve the sleep. And gentle stretches right before bedtime can also be useful for particularly energetic children. It can release the tension in the body to allow for a greater sense of calm and sleepiness throughout the whole central nervous system. Food and drink. Try to avoid food that can be disruptive right before sleep. Heavier rich foods, fatty or fried meals, spicy dishes, and carbonated drinks can trigger indigestion for some children. Foods high in sugar can spike blood sugar and energy levels. Cut back on caffeinated drinks. Caffeine is a stimulant and its effects on the body last for many hours. So there are lots of hidden sources of caffeine. Just to be mindful that tea also contains caffeine as well as coffee. So if your child does like a cup of tea, you could consider switching to decaffeinated tea perhaps, particularly getting closer to bedtime. Chocolate is another source of caffeine, just to be aware of that, particularly dark chocolate as well.
Relaxation is another one. Relaxation is something else you can do with your child in order to get them ready to go to bed. So, lots of different ways to promote relaxation for children and young people during the day. You can try using mindfulness or meditation as a bedtime ritual to allow your child to reconnect with their body. And this helps to turn off the monkey mind. And the monkey mind there is this idea of jumping from thought to thought, and it gives us all a feeling of restlessness and unease. And it often happens at bedtime as we have no other distractions. So when we're lying in bed trying to fall asleep, our mind does jump from thought to thought. And we call this the monkey mind for children. And Yeah, there are lots of ways that you can promote relaxation, and trying to find one that suits your child is important here. So perhaps your children have been doing mindfulness in school or a bit of meditation in school and they may enjoy that. So that's something you can incorporate into the nighttime ritual with your kids. Breathing exercises are another one, or as I mentioned previously, gentle stretches are very good. Mindfulness in particular is good as it appears to have an effect on the emotional part of the brain, the amygdala, or that alarm system in our brain. And mindfulness techniques, they give children tools for self-regulating, which in turn it allows them to pause and reset when they feel like they're losing control a bit. So regular mindfulness helps to strengthen the connections between these areas of your brain associated with attention and concentration. It won't be everybody's cup of tea, but you could certainly try it and see if your child likes it. The research does suggest that it's very, very useful. And there is a very simple mindfulness technique that most children like, and it's the notice five things game. So just consciously noticing the world around you, it can help bring you back to the present, especially when you're overwhelmed by stress or if that monkey mind is turned on. And you can practice this notice five things game with your children. And it's simply sitting down with your child and saying, okay, let's notice five things that you see, or five things that you hear, or five things that you can touch, or five things that you can feel. And that's a very, very simple mindfulness technique.
So now we're going to take a look at the dreaded screen. So we're going to look at the impact that screens have on our sleep. The use of technology at nighttime can interfere with both the amount of sleep we get and the quality of sleep. Viewing bright screens at night can significantly impact the time that children, teenagers, and us start to feel sleepy and eventually fall asleep, as viewing screens increases alertness and inhibits the release of melatonin. Melatonin is the hormone that controls the sleep wake cycle or circadian rhythm, and reducing melatonin makes it harder to fall and stay asleep. And also, another factor here is that we tend to lose track of time when we're on our screens as we become so engrossed in it, particularly for children if they're playing games on the screens.
So screens have a particular type of light that mimics the effects of sunlight on the brain. When we view a bright screen, it can trick our brain into thinking it's daylight and wakes itself up by inhibiting melatonin. So I suppose this is the science behind why screens affect the sleep. And it's basically saying that the light from the screen, it tells the receptors in your eyes to send a message to your brain to create cortisone. And that's a hormone which keeps you awake and inhibits melatonin. So we need melatonin to fall asleep, but the light from the screen creates cortisone, which inhibits the melatonin. So in a natural world, your body clock is set according to the rise and fall of the sun. So in the evening, you start to produce this melatonin, this hormone called melatonin, that gradually makes you feel sleepy. And it continues to increase over the course of the night, helping you to fall asleep and to stay asleep until the morning time. But it dissipates in the early hours of the morning. And the increasing use of screens, and that includes watching television or looking at the computer or a tablet or even smartphones, it's especially problematic for sleep because the electronics emit this particular type of blue light that's capable of triggering the brain to stop making that melatonin that we need.
So, what can we do about screen usage? The research recommends no screen time for at least an hour before bed. Aim not to have screens in bedrooms. Studies have shown that young people with screens in their bedroom get up to an hour's less sleep per night. And it may be useful to charge devices in a separate room. So with younger children, you can start as you mean to go on, and you could adopt a family-wide rule or ban that there's no phone in the bedrooms. This is a tough one for teenagers, especially those already going to bed with phones, but taking the time to strategize on how to set limits is very worth your time and the little bit of resistance you will get. If it's already an issue, aim to cut down gradually. So try to replace screen time with another pleasant activity. So perhaps you could play a game together, read a book together, go for a walk together, something like that. So a good tip is to be a good role model by limiting your own screen time and establish clear rules. So set times when electronics need to be turned off and allow your teen to give input about the screen time rules. So now we'll look at creating a soothing sleep environment, and we'll look at the bedroom here. So the bedroom should be dark and quiet ideally. The room temperature should be just right for your child or your teenager. You could perhaps give your child breathable pajamas. Decluttering the room is a good idea as well, as there's less stimulation and distraction and fewer things that can be misinterpreted as scary if a child wakes up during the night. You could pick colours, artwork, and blankets that are soothing for your child. And there is some evidence that certain smells may have an effect on sleep. So, for example, lavender has been shown to have calming properties. So, creating that soothing sleep environment, some people may find it useful to use a nightlight or a fan if it helps the child feel safe and better about being on their own. And a fan may bring a soothing, soft hum to the room and help to drown out any unexpected noises that might keep them awake. So, now what can we do at bedtime to help our children stay asleep?
We're going to look at here sleep hygiene, routine, and setting up the routine.
Sleep hygiene. So, what is sleep hygiene? It's the term used to describe good sleep habits. Considerable research has gone into developing a set of guidelines and tips which are designed to enhance good sleeping. Evidence suggests that these strategies can provide long term solutions to sleep difficulties. One of the most important things for good sleep hygiene is setting up a bedtime routine, and we will focus on that now shortly. So, research on sleep hygiene is universal for both adults as well as children. So, before we look at setting up a bedtime routine, we're going to look at the sleep wake cycle. So, sleep is set up by an instinct called the circadian rhythms or the sleep wake cycle. This is regulated by light and dark, and these rhythms take time to develop. Circadian rhythm is also known as the body clock. Changes to the circadian rhythm or the body clock occur during adolescence. Teens experience a sleep phase delay, which causes them to naturally feel alert later at night, which in turn makes it difficult for them to fall asleep before 11 pm. Since most teens have early school start times, this sleep phase delay can make it difficult to get the sleep teens need. So remember earlier on we looked at the chart from the American Sleep Foundation, and teenagers, the recommended amount of sleep for teenagers was between 8 to 10 hours a night. One of the best ways to train the body to sleep well is to go to bed and get up at more or less the same time every day, even on the weekends and days off. This regular rhythm or routine will make you feel better and will give your body something to work from. So, keeping the wake up times on school days and the weekends to within 2 hours of each other is the recommended thing to do. So, this helps your body clock get into a regular rhythm. And also, it's important to aim to keep daytime routine the same. So, even if you do have a bad night's sleep and you're feeling tired, it's important that you try to keep your daytime activities the same as you had planned. So, that is, don't avoid activities because you feel tired, and don't let your children avoid activities because they feel tired. So, if your child has football practice, but they're saying they didn't get a good night's sleep and they're feeling tired, it's important to try and encourage them to still continue their daytime routines as they had planned. Because if you let them avoid activities when they're feeling tired, it reinforces poor sleep.
Both humans and animals have evolved to feel calmed by repetitive behaviour, and our daily rituals and habits are a primary way to manage stress. This is especially true in unpredictable environments or situations where we feel pressured, have a lack of control, or are threatened or anxious in some way. So, this is just basically saying having a sense of order or routine in our daily lives, it generally tends to minimize stress, and that helps for sleep as well. Routines are comforting. They're comforting to adults and they're comforting to kids. And we know this ourselves. If we know what to expect, we're less stressed about something. So being in a routine is just about being in your comfort zone. And our brain does strive to make the uncertain world as predictable as possible. So keeping a routine for your children and for your teens is really, really good habit to get into for sleep. A bedtime routine means doing the same things every night in preparation of winding down and going to sleep. Consistent and predictable bedtime routines help to prepare the body and mind for sleep and help children understand and learn what comes next. Children with a regular nighttime routine have earlier bedtimes, fall asleep quicker, wake less during the night, and sleep for longer, and they tend to have fewer behavioural problems during the day. Bedtime routines should involve a set combination of happy and calming activities before bed. Introducing a bedtime routine and specific rituals reminds the body that it is time to sleep. A routine may include having a warm, peaceful bath, getting into pajamas, brushing teeth, going to the toilet, and then perhaps reading a story together. Some children do find it useful to do relaxing stretches or breathing exercises for 15 minutes before bed each night. And just there with the toileting routine, it's recommended to cut down on fluids in the hour before bedtime just to ensure that our kids aren't getting up to go to the toilet throughout the night.
The American Academy of Pediatrics has recommended a very simple bedtime routine for parents to implement, and that is the brush book bed technique. And it's a simple and clear message. Each night, help your children to brush their teeth, read a favourite book or two, and get to bed at a regular time each night. And for younger children, you could even create a visual chart of your child's bedtime routine and stick it on the wall in their bedroom so that they can familiarise themselves with it. And you can even get your child to tick off each activity once it has been completed. So, how to set up the bedtime routine? Firstly, it's important to set a bedtime. So, decide on a suitable bedtime, ensuring your child is getting the optimal amount of sleep for their age. And you could refer back to the chart I showed you earlier from the American Sleep Foundation, which had the breakdown of recommended sleep hours throughout the ages. Then it's important to inform your child of the bedtime. Give a warning as bedtime approaches, be consistent in enforcing this bedtime, and let your child know that a late bedtime is an exception to the rule. So if your child can't tell the time yet, you may want to draw a picture of a clock with their bedtime on it and place it near a real clock so that they can compare, so they know that when the picture that says 7 p.m. on it or whatever bedtime you choose looks the same as the real clock, that's their bedtime. And then older children can be given a clock in their room or a watch to remind them when they have to go to bed. It's important as well to make sure that resistance at bedtime is not due to the child being put to bed too early. So you could establish a later, more suitable bedtime if necessary. And again, you can refer back to the chart from the American Sleep Foundation to decide on the bedtime. It is important to give a warning for bedtime, so saying things like in 10 minutes when the alarm goes off, it will be time to go to bed, or after this story is finished, it will be time to go to bed. If you tell your child suddenly, okay, you have to go to bed now, it only invites resistance. And of course, there will be occasions that it won't be suitable to enforce the bedtime. So, if there's a special program on TV or if there's visitors or family at the house, but you need to make sure that your child knows that staying up late is an exception to the rule on this particular occasion.
The winding down routine is next. So start the winding down routine about an hour before bedtime. And ideally, screens will be turned off where possible at this point, and that should include the television as well if you can. The winding down routine should be consistent and ritualistic, i.e., doing the same calm, quiet activities such as the warm bath, the stories, or listening to music. And it's advisable to avoid rough play or scary TV programs or food and drink that contain caffeine during this winding down routine. So, this is the hour towards just before bedtime. So making sure this routine is always in a predictable order is good. So maybe turn off the screen, then you're going to have your warm bath, we'll do a story together, and then it'll be bedtime. So how do we manage protests at bedtime when we're setting up the routine? It's important to remain calm and clear, and obviously that can be easier said than done. But it is important to try and keep that in mind, to be calm and clear when you're dealing with these protests. Make it clear that it is bedtime. We've already decided 7 p.m. is bedtime. It is bedtime. That's not going to change. Acknowledge that sometimes it is very hard to go to bed, and it's also very important for all of us to get proper sleep. Try not to respond to protests and tears, and remain calm and clear and follow through with the routine. For example, reading the stories, brushing the teeth, those kind of things. So even as your child is crying and upset, just carry on with the routine as best you can in a calm and clear manner. And it is hard. It's the end of the day. Everyone is tired, and you may not have the energy to deal with this. And sometimes it is easier just to say, okay, 10 more minutes, 20 more minutes, half an hour more, that's okay. But it's It's better to stick to your routine as much as possible and manage the protests when they occur so that your routine is established and your child will start to go to bed at the time that they're supposed to. So again, managing protests at bedtime. When it is time for you to go, when you're leaving your child, particularly for younger children, and they're in their bed and you have to leave the room, be confident and convey the message that you know that they can stay in their room. Don't insist that your child has to go to sleep right away, as most children do take up to 30 minutes to go to sleep. And if they're not sleepy, perhaps allow them to read stories or look at a picture book themselves. And this is a useful skill and a good habit for the future for them to get into. So looking at a book or reading a book when they're trying to sleep, but they're not quite sleepy enough yet. And these good habits will stand them in good stead when they're older as well. It's something that they'll do as they're older. But it is important for you to convey the message that you know that they can stay in their room and you're confident that they can do that.
You could also try the checking in technique. So, this means making an agreement with your child. Okay, I'm going to check in on you in 10 minutes if you stay in your bed. So, it offers the child reassurance, and most children will hopefully fall asleep by the second check in. So, there's a lot of advice out there on this, but this particular technique is from the Incredible Years Parenting Programme, which is a parenting programme from the United States. Sleeping in their own bed. This is a very common issue. Some children don't like to sleep in their own bed and they get used to sharing a bed with their parents or caregivers or siblings. But it is important that children get used to sleeping in their own bed. And as we all know, it's much easier said than done. But if the child has a nightmare, it may be better to try to comfort them in their own bed and let them know that you believe in them and that they can handle their own worries in their own bed. So if your child comes to your bedroom, it may be useful to try to return them to their own bed with little fuss and no giving out. So even if the child does have a nightmare, it may be useful to comfort them from their own bed. So, next, we're going to look at some strategies to help our children and our young teens stay asleep. First, we'll look at some common reasons our children may struggle with this, followed by some strategies.
Some common reasons for your child's sleep problems. They may have bad dreams or nightmares. They might have a fear of the dark. They might miss being away from you or feel unsafe on their own. They may feel anxious or worried, or that monkey mind might be turned on. And for some children, there's just too much to do to spend time sleeping. You know, those very energetic kids, they don't want to go to bed because there's too much going on around them. And for all of us, nighttime is when we have less distractions and more time to think. Studies have shown that 30 to 40% of typically developed children have trouble going to sleep and develop strategies to postpone going to bed. And some children are just overstimulated before bedtime. But sleep problems are very, very common in children and in some teens as well. What are the worries at night time? This is just showing the different fears that children have at different ages. So from ages 1 to 3, children may have a fear of being separated from their caregivers. Ages 4 to 6, they often have imaginative fears here, so perhaps monsters under the bed or in the cupboard, and catastrophes that they're starting to learn about at this age as well. So fires or thieves or earthquakes, things that they're hearing about on the news or hearing on the radio, they can start to worry them at night time. And then school age children have more specific worries. So they might be afraid of a school exam or worried about a test that's coming up or worried about a fight with their friends, things like that. And this is just showing the normal worries that children may experience.
So, here are some tips on what you can do if your child suffers from nightmares. So, start with some soothing words. I'm sorry you got scared, or give them a hug and then return them to their own bed. Next, refocus your child away from the memory of the nightmare and onto something else. If you do this, soon your child will forget what the nightmare was about. So you might say things like, oh, look at your face, it's all sweaty. Should we go to the bathroom and clean you up? Or you're really upset, let's think about something nice. How about we plan what we should do tomorrow? Or why don't we try to do some calm breathing or relaxation to get you ready to go back to sleep? You can then recommend some coping tools to demonstrate to your child that she or he has the ability to actively feel better.
If your child has consistent trouble getting to sleep or staying asleep, give your child control over the little things. So let your child choose their pajamas or what book to read or bring their favourite teddy to bed. It's just giving them that little bit of control over their nighttime routine. You can have a little chat with them. So talk about whatever is on their mind in advance of bedtime, but set limits. So say when you say it's time to go, it is time to go. Some research suggests that falling asleep with an adult seems to interfere with the capacity to self-soothe and develop a sense of security. So kids who sleep with their parents, they become more dependent on you to fall asleep. And practically, you're not always going to be available at bedtime for that to happen. So it's important that they do learn to sleep on their own.
You could try a transitional object. So, if your child has a hard time separating from you, try a transitional object. This is a special item that helps your child feel comforted. It helps them feel like part of you is still present, even when you're not there. And it could be something like a stuffed animal or a sweatshirt of yours. The object isn't what matters, it's what the object represents. They can keep it and hold it all night long to help them relax and go to sleep. So, a special blanket or a teddy bear or something like that can give children a sense of security while going to sleep. And don't worry about them becoming too attached to the object. They only usually need such things for a short period of time to help them get through that difficult period.
Another thing that you could try if your child consistently has trouble getting to sleep is relaxation techniques. So breathing techniques are very useful to relax the body. It initiates the relaxation response. And effective breathing comes from the belly rather than the chest. So you can place a soft toy in your child's tummy and making sure it moves up and down. If their breathing is coming from their belly, the toy will move up and down. Muscle group relaxation exercise is another nice exercise you can do with your kids and teens. So if you clench and relax the hands, so you clench them first really tight and then you relax them. Then you point the toes upwards and then relax them. Hunch the shoulders tight and then relax them. Tense the stomach muscles after inhaling and then relax them on exhaling. So that's a very nice muscle group relaxation exercise that calms the body down and releases the tension from the body. And for older kids or teens, you can try audio relaxation clips as well.
Helping with bedtime fears during the day. Give your child approval and reassurance so that they feel secure at night. Repeat and repeat that dreams, both good and bad, are not real. Dreams are the first expressions of children's fears and should not be laughed at or dismissed. Give children a technique to deal with bad dreams. So, for instance, perhaps they could draw a picture of the dream. You could write a story together about the dream but change it to a happy ending, or they could keep a dream journal.
Helping with bedtime fears during the day. So this involves correcting misinformation. So misinformation, for example, from the television, has been found to feed a high proportion of nighttime fears in children. One study reported that 89% of children attribute their fears to negative information they've picked up along the way. If kids see something on TV and they're worried about it happening to them, point out how their circumstances are different. Finding the differences will help to loosen the association between what they've seen and their own circumstances. So it's important just to monitor what our children and what our teens are seeing on the television and on the internet and through the radio, and to have conversations with them about that because they may manifest into nightmares or bedtime fears. So having open conversations about the information and making sure that they're not receiving misinformation. Worry time is another nice technique that you can use to help with bedtime fears. So if your child is worried about something, set aside a time to talk to your child about their worries. This may help your child understand and name what it is they are feeling. If your child still feels anxious at bedtime, suggest writing the worry down and leaving it in a worry jar to discuss the next day. This allows the child to get the worry out of their minds and onto paper. So you could set aside 20 minutes or half an hour each day between 7 and half 7. So if your child is worried about something, you'll sit down every day at that time and discuss their worries. And it just helps your child name their worry and lets them know that their worries are not being forgotten. And a worry jar is a great thing as well, so that if worry time is over and your child has another worry, you may not always have time to address it there and then, so they can write it down, pop it into the worry jar, and then we'll take that worry out again at worry time tomorrow and we'll look at it then.
So now we'll take a quick look at the main take-home messages from today's talk. So sleep is as important as nutrition and exercise. Diet, exercise, relaxation, and watching our screen usage is really important to encourage good sleep hygiene. Routine is key when we're encouraging our children and our young teens to get into good sleeping habits.
Here's some references and additional reading if you're interested in this topic. And thank you all very much for listening. If you enjoyed this talk, please feel free to share it with your friends and family. Thanks very much.